In this episode, we're going to move from big privacy concepts into the daily reality of privacy operations, meaning the recurring tasks and decisions that keep a privacy program functioning when nobody is watching and when the organization is busy. For the Certified Information Privacy Technologist, CIPT, exam, you need to understand privacy operations as a living system, not as a binder of policies that only matters during an audit. Beginners often picture privacy work as a series of dramatic events, like a breach, a lawsuit, or a major product launch. But most privacy outcomes are shaped by ordinary routines: how changes are reviewed, how data requests are handled, how vendors are monitored, and how issues are tracked and resolved. Confidence comes from knowing what normal operations should look like and being able to recognize when something is drifting into risky territory. We'll focus on the operational flow, the kinds of artifacts and signals you rely on, and the habits that keep decisions consistent without requiring heroics. By the end, you should be able to picture a day-to-day privacy operations rhythm and understand how to keep it stable, responsive, and trustworthy. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful way to think about privacy operations is as the maintenance layer that keeps privacy promises aligned with reality over time. Products change, data uses expand, vendors are added, logs are collected, and teams ship features. And every one of those activities can quietly create new privacy risk if it is not managed. Operations exist to catch those changes early, assess them consistently, and guide them towards safer outcomes. That means privacy operations is less about writing one perfect document and more about establishing dependable loops: intake, review, decision, implementation, verification, and record keeping. When those loops are healthy, the program scales and individual mistakes become easier to detect and correct. When those loops are unhealthy, risk grows in the background until it shows up as user complaints, regulator interest, or a rushed crisis response. The exam often tests whether you recognize the need for these loops and whether you can choose actions that strengthen them. One of the most central operational activities is change intake, which is the mechanism for learning that something is about to change before it is already live. In a mature environment, changes that affect personal data do not appear out of thin air. They enter through a process like a feature proposal, a ticket, a design review, or a vendor onboarding request. The privacy operations role is to make sure those entry points reliably route relevant changes to privacy review, without relying on someone remembering to send an email. This is where governance and engineering meet, because the intake process needs clear criteria for what triggers review, and it needs to be embedded in the tools and workflows teams already use. For beginners, the key idea is that operations is proactive rather than reactive, because it is far cheaper and safer to review a change before deployment than to clean up after a mistake. The exam may describe a surprise discovery of a risky data use, and one strong answer pattern is to improve intake and change management so similar surprises are less likely. Once a change is in the system, the next operational step is triage, meaning deciding what level of review is needed and how quickly it must happen. Not every change needs the same depth of review, and treating everything as urgent and high risk can overwhelm the program and cause teams to bypass it. Triage relies on signals like data sensitivity, whether the change introduces a new data category, whether it expands sharing, whether it affects user-facing transparency, and whether it changes retention or access patterns. A low-risk change might require a light check for alignment with existing notices and controls, while a higher-risk change might require deeper assessment and broader consultation. The point of triage is not to minimize work. It is to focus effort where it reduces the most risk and protects the most trust. On the exam, you may see answer choices that either treat everything as a full-scale project or treat risky changes casually, and the best answer usually reflects proportionate, criteria-driven triage. Privacy operations also includes the recurring work of maintaining an accurate understanding of data flows, because decisions depend on knowing where data goes and what it is used for. that usually involves a data inventory, records of processing activities, and a living map of key systems, integrations, and vendors. Beginners sometimes imagine an inventory as a spreadsheet someone updates once a year, but in practice it needs operational hooks into change processes so it stays current. When a new feature is added, the inventory should be updated. When a vendor is replaced, the sharing map should change. When a retention rule is modified, the lifecycle record should reflect it. The operational goal is to prevent unknown processing, because unknown processing cannot be controlled, communicated, or defended. Exam scenarios often involve a team discovering data in an unexpected place or learning that a vendor had access they did not realize, and the operational fix is usually improving inventory maintenance and review discipline. Another daily operational area is request handling, especially requests tied to user rights like access, correction, deletion, and data portability. Even if you do not memorize the fine legal details, you should understand the operational steps. Intake of the request, identity verification, scoping which systems contain the person's data, executing the action, communicating back to the requester, and recording what was done. Privacy operations must ensure these steps are consistent, because inconsistency creates both risk and unfairness. Identity verification is especially important, because responding to the wrong person can become a disclosure incident. Scoping is also important, because partial responses can be misleading or non-compliant depending on the requirement and the organization's commitments. A strong operational approach uses workflows that route tasks to system owners while keeping accountability and oversight centralized. On the exam, if a scenario involves delays or confusion in request handling, the best answer often involves improving the workflow, clarifying responsibilities, and ensuring evidence is captured. Vendor management and third-party oversight is another operational rhythm that requires confidence, because third parties can create privacy risk even if your internal systems are solid. Operations includes onboarding processes, due diligence, contract alignment, and ongoing monitoring, not just a one-time approval. Monitoring can include tracking changes in what data is shared, changes in vendor subprocessors, new features that expand processing, and incidents or performance issues that indicate control weaknesses. A mature operational practice also includes periodic reevaluation, because vendors and their environments change over time. Beginners often assume that once a vendor is approved, the risk is solved, but operational reality is that vendor risk is dynamic. Exam questions may describe a vendor starting to use data differently or a new integration expanding sharing, and the best answer often involves revisiting scope, updating documentation and notices, and ensuring controls remain appropriate. Day-to-day privacy operations also relies on incident readiness, even when no incident is currently happening. This means having clear paths for escalation, defined roles, and rehearsed decision points so that if a privacy incident occurs, teams do not waste time arguing about who should do what. Readiness includes knowing what constitutes a privacy incident, how to evaluate whether personal data is involved, how to preserve evidence, and how to coordinate with security response activities. It also includes having a communication process that supports timely, accurate updates without speculation. From an operations perspective, incident readiness is maintained through periodic checks, review of past incidents for lessons, and updates to procedures as systems change. The exam may test whether you recognize that incident response is not invented during the incident, but is built into ongoing operations. If you can spot gaps in escalation paths and documentation, you can choose answers that strengthen readiness. Another operational skill is handling exceptions and risk acceptance, because real organizations always face situations where the ideal control cannot be implemented immediately. Confidence comes from having a controlled exception process rather than informal shortcuts. A controlled process typically includes documenting the exception, explaining why it is needed, identifying the compensating controls or temporary mitigations, setting an expiration date or review date, and assigning accountability for the decision. Without this, exceptions accumulate and become the default, which erodes privacy protections and creates hidden liabilities. This is also where our ACI thinking matters, because exception decisions should have clear accountability, and the people with expertise should be consulted. On the exam, if a scenario describes teams taking shortcuts due to deadlines, The best answer often includes establishing a formal exception process with documentation and follow-up. That kind of process does not eliminate business pressure, but it prevents pressure from turning into unmanaged risk. Privacy operations requires measurement, but measurement has to be meaningful rather than performative. Good operational metrics focus on whether processes are functioning, like how long requests take, how many changes are reviewed, how many findings are repeated, and where delays occur. Metrics also help identify drift, such as an increasing number of late reviews, a growing backlog of vendor assessments, or repeated incidents tied to the same system. The point is not to create a scoreboard to punish teams. The point is to spot bottlenecks and improve reliability. For example, if request handling is slow, the fix might be better routing, clearer ownership, or improved system tooling for data retrieval. If change reviews are being bypassed, the fix might be better integration into development workflows and clearer triggers. Exam questions may ask what to do when a process is failing, and choosing an answer that improves measurement and feedback loops is often a strong choice because it addresses sustainability. Communication is another daily operational factor that builds confidence because privacy work is cross-functional and misunderstandings are common. Operational communication means clear guidance, consistent terminology, and predictable response patterns, like how quickly teams can expect an answer from privacy review or what information must be included in a request. It also means educating teams in small, practical ways, such as clarifying what counts as personal data in a particular context or explaining why a certain data element creates risk. This is not formal training alone. It is continuous alignment through daily interactions. A privacy technologist who can explain requirements in engineering-friendly language becomes a force multiplier because teams can make better decisions without constant escalation. On the exam, you may see scenarios where teams are confused or repeatedly make the same mistake, and the best operational response often includes improving communication, documentation, and guidance so errors decrease over time. A key pitfall for beginners is treating privacy operations as a set of separate tasks rather than as a connected system. If you improve notices but ignore change management, notices drift and trust erodes. If you handle requests well but ignore inventory maintenance, requests become slow and incomplete. If you vet vendors but fail to monitor change, vendor risk resurfaces quietly. Confidence comes from understanding these connections and maintaining the loops that keep everything aligned. This also means recognizing that operations is about steady reliability, not occasional brilliance. When you build stable workflows, you reduce the number of moments that require urgent intervention. The exam tends to reward answers that improve system reliability because that aligns with how real privacy programs succeed. To command day-to-day privacy operations with confidence, you need a mindset that balances consistency with pragmatism. You rely on intake and triage so you focus effort where it matters most, you maintain data flow awareness so decisions are grounded in reality, and you run dependable workflows for requests, vendors, incidents, and exceptions. You track evidence and metrics not for decoration, but to prove outcomes and improve process health. Most importantly, you treat privacy operations as the mechanism that keeps promises intact as systems evolve, which is the heart of privacy technology work. For the CIPT exam, this translates into being able to choose actions that strengthen loops, clarify ownership, and reduce drift, rather than choosing one-off fixes that feel good but do not scale. When you understand operations as a living system, you stop feeling like privacy is a fragile set of documents and start seeing it as a durable practice that can be run confidently day after day.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.